Welcome to the March 2020 edition of City Connection. City Connection is the live television program with Grand Rapids elected representatives offering community an opportunity to hear about efforts from City Hall and beyond. And it's the opportunity here as well for you to directly talk to our city officials in a more intimate and personal setting. And as part of City Connection, we also provide time for your questions and comments later in the program. So with Community Media Center, I'm your host, Linda Gellasch, and today Mayor Rosalind Bliss has offered to Commissioner Milinda Ysasi the opportunity to come on the show today on City Connection. We'll spend the whole hour with Commissioner Ysasi of focusing our attention on her role in the position to which she's just been newly elected, and we'll discuss her goals and efforts with Grand Rapids 2nd Ward and throughout the city as well. You can also connect with us in the second half of the show by reaching out through email at cityconnection@grcmc.org. You can send your tweets to @GRTV Access. You can also comment at GRTV's Facebook page. City Connection is a collaboration with Community Media Center and the City of Grand Rapids, broadcasting live today, March 9th, 2020. And then also we will be re-airing the show on our channel 25. We're also live streaming at Rapidian.org and on GRTV's Facebook page. And again, we rebroadcast on channel 25 today on channel 24. Commissioner Ysasi, welcome to City Connection.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Well, great, and we're glad to have you as a brand new, a few weeks into your term as City Commissioner, and wanted to ask you a little bit about you.
Okay.
I happen to know you're Executive Director of local nonprofit The Source, but what led you to the role of seeking a City Commission seat?
Well, I've always been, very interested in the political process and civic engagement. So whether it was student government in high school, to student senate in college, and then when I moved back to Grand Rapids from Grand Valley, just getting engaged with different organizations like the Hispanic Center, the YWCA, and seeing how important sort of local involvement and really good public policy, how that is an important process to good democracy. So probably about 2 years ago, now outgoing, retired Commissioner Ruth Kelly reached out to me and said, "What do you think about running for my seat when I'm term limited?" And those of us who know Commissioner Kelly know how dedicated and how responsive she was. And I thought, if she thinks I can do it, maybe this is possible. So it was this belief that I could take my experience working in the private sector, working at great companies like Cascade Engineering and Herman Miller and Spectrum Health, and then leading a nonprofit and sort of seeing how people were experiencing Grand Rapids on the ground. What were the realities of people who live across the city, not just the 2nd Ward? And this evolving conversation that I think Mayor Bliss has really uplifted in terms of how do we make sure Grand Rapids is good for everyone. We're on a number of lists, a number of highlights of this beautiful city, and I've lived here my whole life. My family's been here for 4 generations, and so this is truly home. And I thought I can apply all that, and if Ruth Kelly thinks I can do it, I'm gonna take a shot. And it's been an amazing couple of just really months as a city commissioner, but it was really 2 years in the making.
Okay, so a little bit of mentoring under Ruth Kelly as
Absolutely.
well. What did you learn from her, and how will you take that to the next stage under your term?
What she told me was read the materials, meet with people, make time for really things that might not seem like they're the most pressing, but that's the groundwork that you do. So you're building up relationships, because the reality is, as a city commissioner, it would be very hard to be an expert in any one thing. To me, being a city commissioner is being an expert in relationships and connecting with people. We are a strong city manager, city commission government, and so we have great civil servants who work every day at the city. We do this as part-time jobs, and so she said, just focus on the relationships. If you do that, the rest of the stuff will come. You can do the research. City staff will be able to share with you what are the sort of the details of the topics, and also what she reminded me too is that you just have to get out and not just only meet people, but enjoy all the amenities, experience the city almost like as a sort of a newcomer, and not take for granted all the wonderful things that we have here. So,
your family's been here for 4 generations, you said, and the big aspect of this is you're committed here. You've been here your whole life. What kind of changes have you observed over these years?
Wow, so many different changes. I think most notably in downtown. I remember going to school at Catholic Central, and we would cruise down Wealthy Street, and no problems getting downtown to Catholic Central.
Nothing like
And
traffic.
and now, being very aware of when you're driving down Wealthy, there are, pedestrians all over. There's businesses that weren't there. I mean, and that's just in the last 20 years. So this is not this all didn't happen, in that it was pretty short amount of time, if you think about it. I think some of the pieces that we have around, local businesses who have made Grand Rapids their headquarters, recognizing the talent that we have here in the city, has been, another great investment. All the medical investments sort of on medical miles, so happy that that's part of the second ward, but we look at world-class research that's happening at the Van Andel Institute. Used to work at Spectrum, and just the amount of sort of care that happens in that facility, and people coming from all over the state to receive that, and really all over the country to receive that care. And then lastly, I think, it's sort of what's on the horizon. So our river restoration, the investments that we'll make with our really legacy, Parks Millage that just passed in November as well. And so I think in the next 20 years, I'm just excited to see what will happen.
As you get out in the community and are more of a on-the-ground participant and observer, how are you differently experiencing the city? How are you maybe through some of your constituents' eyes experiencing the city?
Right. Well, I think, one of the biggest things has been to not focus only on certain parts of the second ward. So when we were running, my husband was like, we've got to go to all parts of the second ward. And I think that's what people forget. It's, the wards are pretty vast, they're pretty big. It's obviously a third of the city, about 75,000 people that live in each one of the wards. And so when you look at that space, I think for me, I enjoy sort of going out to dinner, or, maybe going to catch like a play or a musical and doing some shopping. But I also have friends that have really say, we have this beautiful outdoor space. How do you get out and go and experience things like Riverside Park or Huff Park, wonderful boardwalk that's there. And also things of, I've had a lot of calls about dog parks and people wanting to make sure that we have good investments in dog parks. And I've actually had about 5 of those calls that have happened, and that's only been a couple months. And then I think lastly, just the amount of people who are engaged with sort of the alternative modes of transportation and different types of mobility that we have, whether it's autonomous vehicles. I still haven't ridden, now this is my admission, I haven't ridden in the autonomous vehicle yet. So I need to do that. And but utilizing the dash and just trying to take advantage of I think when I was growing up, you would stay in one part of the town. Like I would stay on the south side of Grand Rapids, southeast Grand Rapids. And when I came over to the northeast side, it was sort of like my parents were driving me to another city. Okay. Now I go between, the southeast side of town to the far north end of Grand Rapids, and then come over to the west side. And I don't think twice about it. So I think, it's the technology and the mobility investments that's made that happen. So I hope to go kayaking soon too, when it gets nicer out, and get out there on the water with some of my friends.
With Riverside Park having some access to that.
Absolutely.
So when you think about, you were more familiar with the southeast side, and now you're at the northeast side. What would you say, each of these 3 wards has sort of a personality of its own?
Yes.
How would you characterize the northeast side, the second ward?
Yeah, I think, I would say highly engaged, they know what they want, I think, in the second ward. We know that we have a voice and we want to use it. And so, see a lot of engagement in boards and commissions, new organizations that have popped up. I serve on the North Corridor Improvement Authority, and I got to tell you, the number of business owners that are right there in that North Corridor space, they have done so much to make sure that there is growth and prosperity. And want to make sure that it's not just for their businesses, but they're really looking at it much like we do, I think, here in the region, as like a regional perspective, but saying, how do we go beyond our little storefront? How do we go beyond our block and say, we want to make this North Quarter the best it can be? So very committed, very hardworking, and I think a lot of public art as well. So one of the people that I serve on the North Quarter Improvement Authority, Hannah Berry. She is an artist, owns Lions and Rabbits Gallery. It's a wonderful gallery on Plainfield, and has been very engaged with making sure there's murals and public art. And so I think that is something else that's uniquely sort of the second ward. And then you know, what I mean, we have like Yesterdog, and I mean, all these sort of like historic places. Hancock is one of my favorite places to go to lunch.
So new businesses, old businesses, yeah.
Exactly. So you have that, and then of course, you know, some of the great parks that people love to go to. So Wilcox Park, you know, this past summer was host to a lot of fun things, or Riverside, or you know, even Huff Park, as I mentioned. But I think that's what makes it great, is that there is this identity, and people, it's, you know, we start with, we all love Grand Rapids, and then it's our ward, and then it's our neighborhood, and then I even see, you know, people identifying with the blocks that they're on, and, you know, even doing some of that work. So it's been pretty cool to see that evolution.
Second Ward's kind of known for a couple of block parties, like
Yeah.
you were just mentioning. So what do you think, what has surprised you with the kinds of calls you get, citizen concerns? You mentioned
Sure.
dog parks are one of them that you've heard about.
Sure.
Snow removal is always on that list.
Yes, well, this winter has been a little bit more mild. So this year we rolled out the snow plowing, the pilot program that was part of being led by Mobile GR. And so I think we have only done it once, where there was enough snowfall in this 2020. I think 2 inches, 3 inches of snow, and then we go into certain designated streets and do some of the removal. And it's not completely clear. The residents and business owners are still have responsibilities, and especially in sort of around the bus stops and some of the other what they call a little bit more spaces that need more manual support to be able to clear off the walkways. But we've heard positive things about that, working with partners like GRPS to make sure kids can get to school safely and not worry about having to walk in the street, or, you know, getting in too tall of snow. So surprisingly, I've got a couple of those calls, but not as many as probably Commissioner Kelly has had in the past due to this mild weather and winter. I would also say just, you know, individuals who are asking about ways of how to get involved. I've had a couple of people ask me, you know, how do I get involved on a board or commission, or individuals who want to get involved with the corridor improvement authorities. The other day it was about a high-pitched sound coming out of a local business, and it had had some sound remediation in the past, and they wondered if it had failed, so they were calling back about that. And then, you know, I think also just individuals who are looking for resources. I had a woman who called about making sure that we're still investing in an age-friendly Grand Rapids, and what are some of the resources that are available for those who are aging in place in our city. So it's run the gamut. And sometimes they call us for things that are county-based issues, and we call our friends over at the county, and those commissioners help us out. And so it works out.
Great. We're going to learn a little bit more about you after this break, but we're going to take a quick break. We're going to have a little bit of information out there in the, we'll be right back with Commissioner Ysasi right after this break here on City Connection.
The census is a nationwide survey that counts every person in the United States. This includes documented and undocumented people in the United States. The survey happens on April 1st every 10 years. The first census was taken in 1790, and the next census is taking place on April 1st, 2020. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Association at gpnagr@gpnagr.org.
The Census 2020 schedule is as follows. January 2019 to September 2019, the Census Bureau has opened 248 offices around the country. In August of 2019, the census visited areas have shown large amounts of growth and double-checked all addresses that are accounted for. In January 2020, rural populations like Alaska are starting to be counted. On April 1st of 2020, Census Day is observed nationwide. In April of 2020, Census employees survey large groups like senior centers and the homeless. In May 2020, homes who haven't responded will get visited by employees. In December of 2020, the numbers are delivered to Congress. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Association at gpnagr@gpnagr.org.
The census goal is to count every person and household in the United States and the 5 United States territories. Every household will be counted. Bureau employees will assist people living in large quarters like nursing homes, colleges, homeless shelters or tent cities, military personnel, those displaced from natural disasters, and correctional facilities. It is imperative all people get counted, including undocumented immigrants. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Association at gpnagr@gpnagr.org. The census will ask, how many people are living or staying at your home on April 1st, 2020? Whether the home is owned or rented. About the sex, age, race, and relationships of each person in your home. About whether a person in your home is of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. It will not ask anything related to Social Security number, money or donations, political party, bank or credit card account numbers, or citizenship status. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Association at gpnagr@gpnagr.org.
Welcome back to City Connection. I'm Linda Gellasch in studio with 2nd Ward Commissioner Milinda Ysasi, learning a little bit about her and her new role and a little bit about maybe what she sees for goals for the 2nd Ward. You said something when before we went on break that was talking about the style of government that we have here in Grand Rapids, where it's a strong city manager, the administrator at that level, and then it's this city commission. These are all part-time positions, and knowing how much goes on, I wondered what you thought about that part-time aspect. But then also, if you could tell everybody a little bit again about the structure that we have.
Sure, absolutely. Well, so the structure, yes, so strong city manager government with city commission, and so that is that elected representation where we come into play, but really recognizing that we have very strong civil servants in everyday operations of City Hall. And so whether that is our city manager or our police chief or our fire chief, but that also means, our director of mobile GR or individuals who are working in our office of equity and inclusion. And so it's important for us to remember, and I think when we talk to constituents, that we are always there. I believe, I'll speak for myself, that I am always there to listen to what their concerns and the things that they have in front of them and where they feel like perhaps I could intervene. I think it's important to know that there is a process, certainly reaching out to us, but really, it's probably going to be much better if they connect with, say, like Mr. Naramore, head of Mobile GR, just helped me out with something the other day. Had somebody, a business owner that had written concerned about parking, and really the technical aspects of that are much better to have Mr. Naramore take care of. But certainly follow up on myself to say, we are, want to support your business here. What can we do? But I think what that does is actually helps to reduce sort of the bias that can go along with government. It's like, well, who do you know? And so I love the fact that we have that strong city manager government, because it recognizes that these individuals are in professional roles and they are best suited to answer a majority of the questions. And then we can come in to ask questions around policy or legislation, how it ties to things that might be happening at the state level, because that is, that's always a concern about the local control that we have here in Grand Rapids. And we'll probably talk about that in a bit, about the new gun ordinance that has just been rolled out and will be effective in April. So I think, it's this balance of, and I think anytime you can bring in collective leadership or shared leadership, you're going to get better outcomes. And so having 2 commissioners per ward is part of that shared leadership, but also having those city officials who are doing this work every day as part of that leadership, certainly because they're only part-time positions. And, for me, I try to balance it in terms of, I have a day job, and I think, for people who want to run in the future, I need to work, I want to work, I enjoy my work, and probably most people are also in that position. And so I'm able to, work with an amazing board who says, we believe that this is a value add, we believe you're a value add here, and to be able to create a schedule that allows for engagement at the city.
Talk a little bit about what the source is
Yeah,
and does.
so the source, we work with a variety of employers, 21 different ones here in Grand Rapids and one in Holland. We're providing wraparound services to their frontline employees, so helping people navigate between the housing system, childcare system, through the homelessness system or housing. We also have on-site Department of Health and Human Services caseworkers, helping those who might be receiving public benefits from the state. So this was a model that was started at Cascade Engineering, one of my past employers. There's a theme here. And it was really all about how do we create the most supportive environment that we can for our employees, recognizing that people have choices about, you know, where they work, and so we want them to come and work at one of our source member companies. So why not offer this concierge benefit? Because, you know, different people obviously make different amounts of money, but the one commonality between all of us is that people just don't have enough time. You know, we're working, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, taking care of children, going to school, riding public transportation. And so if we can help reduce sort of people navigating those systems, we want to be a part of that. And so we're kind of like a benefit in the marketplace for employers.
Okay. And then just, you talked a little bit about the transition from
Yes.
one position to the next and
Yeah.
even now to this. One thing I was somewhat noticing is that you talked a little bit about being on the ground and getting to know people personally. It also sounds like it's part of an educational position too, because if somebody can get that direct link to solve
Right.
their problems versus having to ask several and go through that,
Yes.
education seems to be a big part of your role.
Absolutely. It's really about, we have the repeatability of, you know, sort of helping somebody find housing in Grand Rapids. But if somebody has never had that experience themselves and they're trying to do that for the first time, they don't have that repeatability. They don't have those relationships. And so instead of having them go through that whole system and cycle alone and not have the education, we can then say, guess what? We figured this out a number of times for individuals, and we'd love to be able to be there to help and support you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your role as city commissioner, tell us a little bit about some of your personal priorities in
Sure.
that role.
Sure. So for me, when I decided to run, I really thought about, you know, what is my why? Because I think a lot of times you're like, I'm going to run for office, and you're like, well, what are you going to work on? And this time I really took the time and energy to say, okay, what is most important to me and what do I want to focus on? And then it became clear to me, it's really not about me. It's about recognizing that Grand Rapids is a wonderful city. We have a lot of investments, a lot of growth, businesses, people moving here, and not everybody is experiencing Grand Rapids in the same way. The growth and prosperity of the city is not necessarily reaching people in all parts of the ward, not just the second ward, in the same way. And with all of this knowledge and all of this wealth and all of this, I think, community spirit that is Grand Rapids, we should be able to change that. And I think that there is a will to do that, and now we need to figure out how do we do that. So, you know, for me, one of the things is making sure that there's business and employment opportunities across the city. And so recently we adopted the Equitable Economic Development and Mobile GR steering plan. That's a mouthful. At one of our last commission meetings, I had the honor of being on the steering committee with about almost 40 other individuals from a variety of sort of sectors in the city to say, okay, we want development to happen. You know, how do we look at different sort of aspects of economic development? So we get at sort of what are the equitable goals that we'd like to see, and what are some of the structures that can be changed and designed differently so that more people can experience Grand Rapids in this positive way. So things like, we're not just going to measure jobs, but we're going to look at sort of the quality of jobs that are created. We are going to look at sort of the benefits that employers are offering. We're going to look at things like the career pathways that might exist here in the city. So one of the, I think, jewels around sort of talent development and employment opportunities is Mercy Health. I work with them at the source, and I've also been able to work with them at the city because they are helping to lead other employers on this journey to engaging in evidence-based hiring practices. So often we hear people, and people have reached out to the city, you know, I'm looking for a job, I can't find an opportunity. And what we know is that when people, again, kind of like the source, when they are more connected to the resources and understand what is step 1 to step 2 and to 5, that they'll probably be more successful. So we have great companies like Mercy Health, St. Mary's here in Grand Rapids, who have said we want to make an investment in those who sort of live in the neighborhood around the hospital, and not make sure that we're not only bringing them into our sort of offices, but also letting them and encouraging them to move up in the community. So we are working on a project with Mercy Health, The Sources, with West Michigan Works to focus on that career pathways. So, and then the city's also engaged with the Higher Reach program, which Mercy Health is as well. So those business and employment opportunities, and then a safe and accessible public safety system. So to make sure that everyone feels safe here in this city. And so things like the new gun ordinance that focuses on the fact that toy and replica guns, oftentimes it's children, young people who are maybe getting their hands on those or using them, thinking they're a toy and not recognizing that they're a weapon. And so in the ordinance, which will be effective April 1st, is making sure that in the first, if there is somebody with a toy replica gun, the first incident will be considered there will be a civil infraction. Again, recognizing how can we decriminalize things here in our community so we can have a more just community where people have that ability to sort of overcome and have like second chances.
So it sounds like the goal is not to be punitive, but
Yes.
Helping direct or inform.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And then if there was a second offense, that would be a misdemeanor. And so last week, this was rolled out at the press conference with our police chief, Chief Payne, and Mayor Bliss, and a number of community partners, including some young people from the Mayor's Youth Council. And I think when we look at, again, that's sort of under the umbrella of equity, and it's not even an umbrella, it's it's our framework, and what we should be doing is saying, where are systems and structures not working for everyone? And if we can have some local control over how we write our ordinances and how we enforce them, doesn't that build better relationships as well, sort of on the community and police side? I think also this year's Neighborhood Summit was focused on quite a bit about climate change and climate justice and environmental justice, energy efficiency, and all the investments that the city is making, and individuals are really doing in their own personal choices that they're making. And so we have a new emergency preparedness manager, Allison
Ferroli.
I
was on the show a couple months ago.
Yes, okay, good. You're much better with remembering names than I am. Thank you, Linda. But Allison has come to us from Charlottesville, Virginia. I did remember that. Okay. And I think, and she's working, she works inside the fire department. So I think that's great too. So it sort of shows, I think what it shows is that we are really working to make sure that there are not silos and buckets of work that's happening in the city, but emergency preparedness, climate change, climate weather events. I mean, that was in the fall when we had, I don't know if they ended up being straight winds or tornadoes that were in Belknap Lookout area that were, thank
Took
goodness.
apart an apartment building.
Yes, absolutely. And so, having Allison on board to be able to talk about these things, to me, that also goes to our public safety system. So priority 2 would be a proactive and accessible public safety system. So that could mean community and police relations, it could be our emergency preparedness, and it could be working with residents who, are just creating more opportunities to connect and to know their neighbors. I love the saying where, for the Neighborhood Summit, it's about I'm not watching my neighbors, I see you. And so this recognition that it's not punitive, that it's not about who's doing what in my neighborhood, but I'm gonna know my next door neighbor, I'm gonna know my across the street neighbor, I'm gonna know people on my block, and that's gonna build a safer and healthier, community.
So you're referring to the Neighborhood Summit that
Yes.
happened this past Saturday.
Yes.
Tell a little bit about what that is, what year of that we're in, and how it's kind of evolved over these years.
Yeah, so we are in this was the 6th annual Neighborhood Summit, and it was held at Grand Valley State University. This was a vision that Mayor Bliss had, and working with Stacy Stout, who's one of the assistant to the city manager. We got a lot of fancy titles at the city. And so in Stacy's team, Jordan was one of the individuals who actually was the lead for this. So it was a little bit of a transition, which I love to see too, is, it doesn't have to be one person who's always in charge of it, but how do you sort of move it to the next individual? And then also a number of city residents, neighborhood association leaders who are part of the planning team and executing that day. We had almost, I think, a little over 400 people who attended at Grand Valley, and we kicked off the day with Anne Marie Hurdle, who was one of our speakers, a local individual who's been very much involved. She used to work at the League of Conservation Voters and now is on her own doing environmental justice work, and then had individuals who were kind of from different communities who were talking about the importance of making sure that the environmental justice movement isn't just seen as one way, isn't just seen as a predominantly white movement, but how do we make sure that communities' colors are brought into this space? How do we make sure that young people are brought into this space? I mean, we see this year we had a teen track where we had young people who came and did cool things like podcasting with some folks, and just recognizing the power that they have as young people as well. And we had the Kids Summit as well. The kids had on shirts that said not future leader, Grand Rapids leader, because we're recognizing that they are leaders today.
And that's actually a part of the focus, if I understand correctly, that to make sure everybody can attend. There's elements, if you need to bring your children, please bring your children. There's things that will happen for them.
Absolutely. So it's about what are all those barriers and what do we need to eliminate. So it's free thanks to our generous sponsors. Childcare is provided, in making sure it's good quality programming. And then I thought, throughout the day, maybe people are going to leave, they're tired, and people were there and they were afterglow. So I think what it really signaled is that, community engagement just happens in a lot of different ways. It could mean showing up at a city commission meeting and speaking for 3 minutes. It could be going to the neighborhood summit. It could be volunteering in your neighborhood association. It could be applying for funds for the neighborhood match. So that was we also highlighted individuals who had received mini grants from the neighborhood match, which we're able to expand this year due to more dedicated funding. So highlighted things like programs that are kicking off the opening of some of our pools and really reducing sort of the stigma around swimming and who knows how to swim and who doesn't. And then one of the other projects that was highlighted was the Black Book Exchange. So like the little, the neighborhood libraries that you can just kind of take a book and share a book. So there was another individual who highlighted that. So lots of good things that are happening, all led, I think, by residents and community members who have said, we live here and we want to make sure this place is really accessible for everyone.
Okay. Well, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll actually be in the section for some questions, and we've already have one here.
Okay,
so we'll start
great.
with that.
Okay.
City Connection on GRTV's Livewire, Channel 24, with Commissioner Ysasi.
By April 1st, 2020, every home will receive a letter to participate in the 2020 census. Immediately after your home receives this letter, you should fill out the census. There are 3 ways: over the phone, on the internet, or by mail. If you live in Puerto Rico, the U.S. island areas, group living arrangements, or any other non-traditional living situations, the Census Bureau employees will be aiding in your completion. The census is available in 12 languages, and hub centers will be equipped with internet, phone, and translation services. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Association at gpnagr.gpnagr.org. The City of Grand Rapids and the heart of West Michigan United Way are partnering together with local businesses and nonprofits to create hub centers. You will be able to fill out the census on paper, over the phone, or online at these centers. Translators and computers will be available to help as needed. Accessible transportation is currently being discussed. To see a list of regional hub centers, visit BeCountedMI2020.com. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Association at gpnagr@gpnagr.org.
Title 13 of the U.S. Code states the Census Bureau cannot release any identifiable information about individuals, households, or businesses, even to law enforcement agencies. All census information is kept completely confidential. Census Bureau employees swear under oath and can be punished with a $250,000 fine and 5 years in prison. Not even the FBI, CIA, DHS, ICE, the Patriot Act, or a court-ordered subpoena will have the power to retrieve or access census data. All online servers have the utmost security, and IP addresses will be tracked and monitored. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Association at gpnagr@gpnagr.org. This is the first year the census is offering an option to fill out the form online. In each household's letter sent on April 1st, there will be a unique ID. Do not share the ID with anyone outside of your home. When you fill out the census online or over the phone, you can use this ID or your home address. If you lose the ID, you will still be counted. Just use your address. The Census Bureau will not accept forms submitted by the same ID or the same address twice. For more information, visit census.gov or email the Garfield Park Neighborhood Association at gpnagr@gpnagr.org.
Welcome back to City Connection. We are live in the studio with Commissioner Ysasi, and we are actually in the half of the program where we're going to take some questions with this one already in. And Commissioner, you had mentioned how this is a part-time position.
Yes.
Pretty big role for part-time, but this question comes from Chad, and it says, does a part-time compensation for commissioners limit who can afford to run for commission?
I think that is a great question. And it's also a question that is always on my mind is when I think about equity and I think about privilege and power, who has access, we can say this is an open seat because of term limits, but who actually can access that seat? And so I think there's merits to that question. Like, absolutely, I recognize my own privilege of working for an employer who has immense amount of flexibility in my schedule and who has identified that this is something that they feel is good and would like me to be a part of. But I can't say that for every single employer. So that's one. Two, I would say yes, absolutely. I would not be able to do this if this were my only job. I do need to work, and so I'm sure that's a number of other people in the second ward or any ward who would be interested in running. And just the reality of even taking the time to campaign. It's about a year. It's a year-long process that I engaged in of trying to tell people that you're doing it, and then a year of actually running, and then you have a primary, and then you have a general election because nobody in the primary got over 50% of the vote. So I think when we look at local elections, we do need to look at who has access and how much does it cost. I mean, this is all public information. So I raised about $50,000, and at the start of the campaign, I probably had like $100 from my parents or something. So money does play into this. I think what's important to know is that I am very grateful to the amount of sort of grassroots supporters, people who gave me $5 a month, $10 a month, who gave me $20 a month and said, this is what I can do. And it didn't matter. It's any amount of money we would take, but certainly money plays into it because you need the name recognition sometimes. And if you don't have that, you're trying to go door to door, or you're trying to make enough money to send out mailers that are beautiful designed, but that costs a lot of money to mail those out. That's a majority of what any campaign probably spends on is
the printed
mailings. Yes, absolutely. Because if you can get volunteers, we had volunteers, and go and knock on those doors, and it's your brothers and sisters and friends and family. But it's time, and time is also, even though we don't necessarily put a monetary amount on it, it's the money you need to raise and the time that you need to put into it. So thank you for the question, Chad.
Yeah, significant investment. You mentioned the word primary, so let's take a slight turn. And tomorrow is here in Michigan, the primary elections.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that and how you feel the city is prepared, because it's new this year in that early voting for any reason is possible. Yet it's a very high-profile primary season?
Absolutely. I think just everything that's happened this past weekend with all the candidates on both sides has shown that people are recognizing that Michigan is important, and it will be important to this election, both on the primary side, but also in the general election. So I think it's, I think a lot of people feel like Michigan is, sort of this example of what, could be in any other parts of the country. So we are prepared. We know that there is going to be higher turnout, or we anticipate that there will be higher turnout, in this primary election. So sending out reminders to individuals, utilizing, our social media channels and the other pieces that we have to remind people to get out and vote. So Prop 3, no reason absentee voting. There still will be people who have requested that absentee ballot, might not end up turning that in. They could go in person, say if something changes, and vote at their precinct.
Let's
that
drill
often
down on
happens.
that a little bit. So
Sure.
let's say somebody did request
Yes.
a ballot from one party or the other, primary.
Yes.
What then can you do at that point? Your candidate maybe has dropped out at this
Yes.
point. What do you do?
Yeah, so we're in real time. It's 4:41, and today at 4 was the deadline to either request in writing or go to the clerk's office to ask for a new ballot if your ballot was spoiled, if you decided to
new
vote.
absentee ballot.
A new absentee
Gotcha.
ballot. You could also still go tomorrow and vote in person at the clerk's office, or you can also go to your precinct if something has changed. So say if you maybe were doing it for no reason, and you're still going to be in the community.
Okay.
So we also did open another election site at 201 Market to make sure that individuals, maybe sometimes getting down to City Hall, we often talk about getting into City Hall isn't always the easiest. I often find myself helping people get on the elevators and figure out where to go. The great thing about something that was done over this last year is that we're validating parking if people do come to the city clerk's office, because we recognize that paying for parking could be a barrier. So what are all those barriers that we can eliminate to make sure that people's votes, they're able to vote, that it's counted, and just making sure that they're part of that political process. So I'm excited to see. I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on Michigan tomorrow, and even today as I was driving here, just all the reports about predictions about what's going to happen, and just hopefully that turnout is high and people exercise their vote.
Our state a very key player based on the candidates that come through in the last few days. Your precinct in particular, but maybe it's in all three, I'm sorry, not precinct, ward, has had some changes in the voting precinct locations.
Yep. So precinct 33, which up until tomorrow, voted at St. Thomas. And so those voters are now going to go to Aquinas College, to the field house. And I cannot remember the name of the field house. They gave it a new name, but they will go to Aquinas, and that's where they'll vote instead of St. Thomas. And so that was due to just some of the changes with the diocese, where students are still, the Catholic schools don't close on election day. And so just wanting to make sure, students were protected and not having people coming in and out of the campus when students were there. And so then Aquinas, we were able to do it there. So I have a couple of people who said, it used to be right across the street from me, and what am I going to do? And they said, it'll be fine, I'll just walk around the corner. So, but that was a change. And then I believe in the first ward, there was also a change. And I do not quite remember what specific precinct that was in the first ward.
City clerk's office, a good
The
location?
city clerk's office, if individuals go online, it will have that information. And also those who were impacted did receive a notification in the mail. But just like anything, we live busy lives and we get things in the mail, and sometimes we don't look at it right away. So if there's any questions that people have on election day, also calling 311 tomorrow is absolutely an option as well. And 311 and the city clerk's office have been working together to make sure that we can field those calls so people can get any questions they have answered on election day.
Okay. Polls open at 7 a.m. and
7
close
a.m.
at 8 p.m.?
Correct.
All right. And then the last thing I was going to ask you a little bit about, any predictions on how long it'll take to get results for Michigan or even Grand Rapids or our area?
Well, I can only base this on what I experienced in my election.
Okay.
And my election wasn't anywhere near as many people sort of voting, but we do have a lot of predictions that it will take some time to know who won on both sides of the different parties because of absentee ballots. So we know that more people are engaging in the no reason absentee process, but we cannot start counting those until the day of until that evening. And so what usually happens is we get in all the results from the different precincts, and then we figure out those results in those precincts with the absentee ballots. And so on my night, on election night, it was almost midnight, and then we found out. So I imagine it's going to take a little bit of time. And so when we look at some of the some of the changes in the law, that is sort of, I guess, an unintended consequence, but we do want to make it easier for people to be able to vote. And so it's trying to balance all of those pieces out. So I think it'll be, some people are saying maybe the next day we won't know. I don't know. I'll be watching. And
an abundance of caution after the beginning of the first caucus and primaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is the best thing that we can do. I know I was not ready to call my race until I knew the absentee ballots had dropped in, and then I could, really claim victory. So.
Okay. All right. Well, right before we go into the next break, this isn't a question, but it's a comment. And it
Okay.
says, this one comes from Mo, and he's saying, I just want to say that I love how the bus is free downtown. Thank you for that. So that comment from Mo.
Okay, thanks, Mo.
We'll take another break before our last segment. This is City Connection on GRTV's Livewire, Channel 24.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
Welcome back to City Connection. Again, in studio with Commissioner Ysasi representing the 2nd Ward. We're doing some of your questions with a few answers and a few comments here and there. This one comes from Holly, and it says, as a parent of a 6-year-old child attending GRPS school, we've had many issues with deemed transportation. Has the city looked at working with GRPS to help provide consistent and safe transportation for young students to school?
Well, thank you for the question, Holly. I would say I'm probably on Facebook too much. I've certainly had heard this question in other ways. I can't speak if there has been in the past. I know I haven't been a part of any conversations, or when I think about transportation in our city, it's branded as Mobile GR, and Josh Naramore is the leader over that, and I think he's doing an excellent job. Whether it's looking at ways of, how do we know that people travel in vehicles and probably still fairly rely on personal vehicles here in our community. But knowing that our city is growing and how do we create more mobility options, I think Josh is doing an excellent job, his team over there, to make sure that we're always thinking forward, especially as we continue to be a destination city. So I am not aware of any of those conversations that have happened, Holly, but I'll call my buddy John Helmholt, and maybe we can talk about it. I don't know.
All right. Well, that brings up another question that before we went on air, you and I chatted a little bit, but on almost everybody's mind right now is COVID-19, the coronavirus that making its way around the world, not
Yeah.
necessarily a hot spot right here in
Yes.
Grand Rapids, but just wondered at the city level,
Yeah.
what are the emergency preparedness plans?
Sure.
I know the county has a health department, might be taking lead on that.
Yep, absolutely. So, yes, certainly Dr. Adam London, I think, doing a great job of keeping information out there about I think the last report I saw was from yesterday where there were 8 individuals who, were under like a quarantine, and then 8 were released. So yes, no concerns here in our community. However, what I would say, Allison and her role with the emergency preparedness, working closely with the county health department. I had a chance to talk to one of our county commissioners at the neighborhood summit, feeling very positive about all the efforts that we're doing on the county level to make sure we're communicating. I've seen this hashtag, prepared not panicked, and I think that is really in our best interest, is recognizing that there's lots of public health issues. Certainly this one has risen, and is very unfortunate to see cities who are dealing with deaths and the quarantines, and quite honestly the economic impact to events being canceled like South by Southwest, or just travel that is halted because of the concerns to the coast. So I think we can't underestimate that there is an impact here and that there is a public health concern. I also think we can do things as simple as washing our hands thoroughly. We kind of did a little coronavirus kind of,
Not a handshake,
but an elbow bump. If people are able to work from home or to not have to use public transportation, if they're even ill, that I know that's one of the advisements as well. So I think this idea of checking out the Kent County Health Department for regular updates. There's also some good videos there, which I think I love too, because not everybody wants to read something. They might want to connect in a video. We just put out another reminder from the city as well that was coming from the county earlier today. I know Mayor Bliss shared that. But some of those just basic public health pieces, and to make sure that individuals who can be who can sort of stay out of harm's way is probably best. So those who have compromised immune systems, or those who are much more elderly, or just dealing with much more serious health concerns, sort of staying at home, I think, would just be in the best interest of themselves and their families. I know that's what I'm encouraging people in my own family to do if they can, especially my 8-month-old niece, like Luna. It's like, I just want her to stay at home, and but I'm really, I feel very confident in the work of the Kent County Health Department and Allison's work and the coordinations that's happening on the ground. Also, I think the health systems, we have some great health systems here, and they have done a lot to make sure that they're communicating out to their patients and to their suppliers. But I know that it's a lot of awareness, and just making sure we're engaged in some good hand washing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great one step that everybody can do. With maybe 3 minutes to go, I wanted to see if there's anything you'd like to kind of bring up that we haven't talked about yet, and
let's see, so many things.
The next, you've been at 4 city commission meetings in your first 2 months, because they're bi-weekly is basically the schedule there.
2 a month.
Okay, so what we're looking at is maybe the next one, which is next week, is that right? And maybe some of the highlights that you anticipate taking on with that agenda.
Absolutely. So next commission meeting is going to be a night out commission meeting at Burton Elementary Middle School on Buchanan. So
that's an opportunity that the commission gets out in the community and rotates around the wards.
Yep. So those who maybe live close by, or who sometimes can't make it downtown to City Hall, I hope they might consider joining us at Burton for that first commission meeting of March. In front of us, lots of things, sort of adult use marijuana and some of the zoning pieces there that we didn't quite get to at our last meeting. We had some votes, they were split votes, nothing passed, so nothing has changed at this point as it relates to medical and or adult use. So that will certainly be in front of us as the commission. And I think then, the other piece that I would say is that we are really working, city staff have been working to prepare and present the budget for the next year. So that is a lot of heavy lifting that happens sort of at the end of the calendar year, at the end of 2019, in January 2020. And so we will start to be having those conversations and really looking at, what are the priorities that we have in the city, and how will we fund all of those? And just making sure that that process moves smoothly. And then lastly, I would say, just a reminder in the second ward, we were talking a little bit, it's not so much on the commission meeting, but just for everyone to be aware as they're driving through our city streets and neighborhoods of, stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalks. I think I notice it so much more as a commissioner, and try to be very aware of my surroundings when I'm walking through the community. And as soon as you start to slow down, it's not just about pedestrian safety, but it's overall traffic safety. And I think that's my sort of 1 foot challenge to people today is like, what's one thing you can do is like slow down a little bit and make sure you're paying attention to those crosswalks, because there are people who are walking all over this town, riding their bikes, and we want to make sure we keep everyone safe.
And then to be clear, the more recent ordinance is that if as soon as somebody begins to enter the crosswalk, that they have the priority right of way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, and so a lot of times that I see that not happening. So we just want to keep everyone safe and keep enjoying sort of our neighborhoods and our streets. So.
Okay. One more piece I was going to ask you about, and that was the recommendations from a task force that the city formed, having to do with when maybe a term of a elected office is unexpired, somebody's vacated that, and where does that stand?
Yep. So right now, that's been presented. So we have acronyms for everything. The TFER, Task Force on Elected Representation. Thank you to those who were involved with that process. That was a huge undertaking. I think some of the feedback they gave us was that it was a short amount of time, there was no budget, and that there was a lot of research that needed to be done. So appreciation for really residents who went through this process to present with us a variety of issues. What I loved about the process is that they didn't really say one thing or another. They said, these are all the issues in front of us, whether it's moving elections to even years or having more commissioners, having 4 wards instead of 3, or things like even when to not have an appointment process, but really to have special elections. So what they did was they presented sort of these are the reasons for, these are the reasons not for, and then what was a recommendation. So I appreciated that was a fairly transparent process in that regard. I have some thoughts about, I just went through my own election, and so I have lots of thoughts about sort of money that's needed in running local races, the time frame, all these sorts of things. So I'm always happy to share those experiences because I think that is part of the research on the ground. At this point, we are looking at those, and there are some deadlines associated with if we decide to adopt things or putting things on the ballot. So my sense is that we're working through this budget process. We will have an understanding of what does this actually look like to take some of these recommendations and perhaps sort of propose them. Some of them can be decided solely on the vote of a commission, and others would require further work. So at this point, a lot of research and trying to understand. Also balancing, I said it in one of my first commission meetings, the word priority was never meant to be plural. It was supposed to be the one thing.
That does make sense.
But it is out there, and will be something that I'm continuing to research and make sure I understand fully, so I can make a strong, informed decision in the end.
Well, thanks for spending this hour with us. If people want to directly reach out to you, how would you prefer they do that?
Yes, I love email. It's a good record. It's mysasi@grcity.us.
And spell your last name.
Ysasi.
Okay.
So, or they could call 311 and ask to be connected, and somebody from that department will be happy to make sure that I receive that message.
Great.
All right.
Well, Commissioner Ysasi, thanks for spending this hour with us. A great informative show. Welcome to the City Commission.
Thank you.
And thanks for sitting in for Mayor Bliss today. We typically do the show on the first Monday of the month. We adjusted a little bit this one, but we'll be back in April with the first Monday of the month for City Connection, airing at 4 o'clock. Again, thank you, and we'll exit with City Connection. I'm Linda Gellasch with Commissioner Ysasi here on GRTV's Livewire, Channel 24.